This is Brian Alvarez,
And Filthy Tom Lawler.
and you're watching Wrestling with Regret.
Even though I guarantee that you won't regret it.
This week's episode is brought to you by the letter C. C for cocaine! I know it's kind of a tired trope, but it's really hard to look back at the World Wrestling Federation in the mid-1980s, take a good hard look at all the wacky characters of the time, and not suspect the white gimmick played a hand in all of it. And nowhere was this more apparent than the first two iterations of the Slammy Awards, especially in 1987. But first, a bit of background. Long before the Slammys served as an excuse for fans to bitch online over a kayfabe award, they were an excuse for the Federation to promote their cheesy albums. In particular, the inaugural ceremony in March of 1986 was dedicated entirely to the wrestling album. Awards were given out for specific performances, and fans saw live renditions of some of the album's biggest songs. For instance, Jimmy Hart sang Eat Your Heart Out Rick Springfield, Mean Gene sang Tutti Frutti, and Hillbilly Jim sang Don't Go Messin' with a Country Boy. And if they played his performance back on the network today, it might sound a little something like this. Thankfully, not every song from the album got a live cover. Fans had to wait another 11 years for Nikolai Volkov to try and sing Cara Mia.
Must we say goodbye?
Another highlight from that first event saw Roddy Piper accept his award for Best Personality in the Land of a Thousand Dances video, only for the trophy to break because somebody looked at it the wrong way.
And as for your trophy, that's what I was gonna do with it anyway.
Sadly, this seemed to be the theme of the '86 Slammys. Everything looked cheap. From the trophies, to the podium, to the uninspired set and dull lighting, one gets the feeling this is all thrown together at the last minute and poorly done at that. For a maiden voyage, the first ever Slammys come off kind of like a dud. That would all change the following year after the release of Piledriver, the wrestling album 2. This album was bigger, badder, and louder than the first, so the Slammy Awards had to up their game as well. All they needed was a bigger set, some choreography, and... Whoa! Whew! Just a little bit of magic. The show begins with a helicopter shot flying toward Atlantic City.
It's not the Oscars. It's not the Emmys.
It's not the kind of thing you should be proud to watch. After Mean Gene's presumably killed in a fiery crash, we go to the opening credits where we learn the show's being referred to as the 37th Annual Slammy Awards as opposed to the second, which it was.
This is pro wrestling, you round up.
Viewers see a lovely montage of a red carpet show outside Caesars where the stars of the WWF roll up in style. The Heenan family in a Rolls Royce, the Honky Tonk Man in a Cadillac, the Hart Foundation in an ambulance covered with paper hearts, Brutus Beefcake in an ice cream truck with a barber's chair, the Bolsheviks on mules, the Ultimate Warrior, Outback Jack, and more all riding on a hay truck? You know what? Forget what I said about the '86 Slammys looking cheap. The British Bulldogs arrive with their mascot Matilda, which goes against kayfabe since by this point the Islanders already abducted Matilda, so it doesn't make any sense for her to... Wait, what am I saying? As I'm watching what has to be the strangest episode of Wacky Racers in history, I'm suddenly struck with the realization that somewhere in Titan Towers there is a complete version of this red carpet event somewhere in their archives, and I have to see it. Howard Finkel's disembodied voice declares that some of the night's sponsors include Schlitz Malt Liquor and milk. Talk about casting a wide net. Vince McMahon opens the ceremony, holding a trophy that looks as if it'll hold up a lot better than the ones from the year before. It does not take long before things start getting weird.
You at home and all of our nominees will leave tonight the better for having participated in this joyous celebration.
After Vince looks to have pulled a muscle on stage, we go to our official hosts, Jesse Ventura and Mean Gene Okerlund, who apparently survived the chopper crash from earlier. In his very first line, the body is already saying what we're all thinking.
It is truly an honor to be hosting this spectacular event. Isn't that right, Jesse?
No, that ain't right, pipsqueak.
Gene goes on to say the votes for the awards were tabulated by the WWF's Academy of Sports and Sciences, headed up by company president Jack Tunney. And yes, you probably have a good idea where this is going.
You expect me to introduce Jack from Ass?
Well, yes.
This year's event's a step up from the first in more ways than one. Not only have the production values ramped up significantly, they've also expanded the categories to include in-ring exploits, not just the new album they were pushing. The first award was for Best Performance by an Animal, which went to George the Animal Steele, of course. Steele ambles his way to the stage before refusing the trophy, taking a bite out of the turnbuckle pad on the podium instead. I know it's supposed to be stuffing and all, but one look at that podium now and, well, it would explain a lot is what I'm saying. It's time for our first musical number of the night as the Honky Tonk Man does the Honky Tonk Man. Gene's words, not mine. He's joined by Ventura on the piano, but even though it looks like he's actually playing, the conspiracy theorist in me thinks something's amiss. For whatever reason, the only one on stage with a hint of actual musical ability, Jimmy Hart, spends his time sitting in the car way upstage. Glad to see him there, I guess. Now it's time for the real high spot of the song as the Hart Foundation show more charisma here than Bret ever did in his singles run. Jim Neidhart doing the hand jive will never get old. Honky and the Colonel are back on stage to present an award immediately following that song, and the Intercontinental Champ shows absolutely no signs of fatigue. The nominees for Woman of the Year include Sensational Sherry, a woman playing Dolly Parton, the Fabulous Moolah, a woman badly playing Yoko Ono, and the eventual winner, Miss Elizabeth. It's easy to forget just how few women were part of the company around this time, so much so they had to add celebrity impersonators to their lineup. I mean, you can make a connection between Dolly Parton and wrestling. Who can forget her marrying Hulk Hogan on a sketch for her variety show just months before this? But Yoko Ono had about as much to do with the Federation as she did with breaking up the Beatles. Jim Duggan's attire for the evening's pretty on brand as he presents the award for Best Dressed Ring Apparel. Honestly, Demolition should win every Best Dressed award from here on out for those spiky vests alone. But instead the winner's King Harley Race, who happens to be feuding with the Hacksaw during this time. After Jim Duggan refuses to bend the knee, a brawl between the two of them breaks out. Gorilla Monsoon suddenly shows up to call the action as we get one of the wildest brawls in WWF history. Duggan and Race tear their way through the makeup area, the women's dressing room, the catering area, a utility closet, a giant wall of cardboard boxes, and a random assortment of farm animals?
Look at the brain, right underneath the donkey, running for his life now. I knew sooner or later he'd make an ass out of himself.
In the battle, Race grabs a chicken by its neck and beats up Duggan with it, which, no joke, kills the chicken. That's an original recipe for brutality. This fight goes on for much of the show, in several installments, and even runs over some of the other award proceedings. We don't even get to see Brutus Beefcake present the award for Best Head. Oh, this head. I mean this kind of head. And now it's time for the one part of the show everyone remembers, Vince McMahon and friends performing a rousing rendition of Stand Back. Look at all those guys on stage playing their instruments so expertly. They're really into it now. I mean, if I discovered these guys weren't actually playing, I'd begin to think this whole ceremony was a sham. If you listen to the lyrics, the song seems very autobiographical, all about Vince wanting to take down people who stand in his way. We even get some early signs of the Mr. McMahon voice. Clearly he has it out for someone here, and his name rhymes with Tim... Crockett.
All of you who want to bring me down, I have you. Stand in my way. I promise you will lose. Stand back.
This number is Vince McMahon's ego in a nutshell. There's no way that someone pitched this idea to him. This is clearly a concept born from VKM's own skull. I don't know if Vince as announcer was ever considered cool, or at least as cool as he makes himself out to be here, but even if he were, I sincerely doubt fans at the time were banging down the doors for an elaborate song and dance number involving these grotesque gyrations, or a 2-second bass solo from Hogan, who's probably the only wrestler on stage who actually knows how to play the instrument he's been given. That being said, can we all pause for a moment to appreciate all the work the dancers are doing here? We've seen some impressive choreography on the night so far. We're not even done. Those girls need to get their props. Speaking of the Hulkster, he and his pythons show up to present the Real American Award, but not without saying something first that sounds kind of creepy in hindsight.
But when I saw all my Hulkamaniacs at the Slammys tonight, what a turn on you guys are. That's unreal.
This award, dedicated to someone who embodies the American spirit, goes to none other than one of Hogan's biggest influences, superstar Billy Graham. Fresh off the last match of his career, the Karate Master himself gets on stage and lies through his teeth about how much he loves Hogan. After the speech, Hogan motivates Graham to walk off stage without his cane, but the way he goes about it makes him look kind of like a dick. It's now time for the Jesse the Body Award. Rick Rude wins out over guys like Butch Reed, Ultimate Warrior, Sherry, and Hercules, and decides to celebrate as only he can. I wonder how many kids who were watching this at home had their parents walk in at this exact moment. We get a montage of big highlights from 1987, which surprisingly shows nothing from WrestleMania 3. Then it's time for the Best Hit Award, which goes to Jim Duggan. The brawl between he and Race had finally wrapped up only minutes before, yet Hacksaw only looks maybe 10% worse than he did at the start of the night. Up next is the Manager of the Year award. Yet despite the best efforts of Slick, Jimmy Hart, Mr. Fuji, and Bobby Heenan, the award goes to none of the above, which seems impossible. I mean, at worst, it's a four-way tie, right? Hell yeah, now it's time for the real best song of the wrestling album 2, the title track, Piledriver by Coco Beware.
It sounds like an argument. It sounds just like a
They try to recreate the construction motif for the music video to the best of their abilities, with Hillbilly Jim playing the role of a confused-looking pile of lumber. Don't worry about him, he's just starting to come up with his Hall of Fame speech. One of the bright spots from this performance has to be Bam Bam Bigelow just killing it on the tenor saxophone, even though that is clearly not the sax he's holding. And for the first and only time during a musical act in this show, we actually get a cutaway to a romantic date between Coco and a lady in his life. Also, Frankie. Frankie likes to watch. We move on to the Best Personal Hygiene Award, won by the Bolsha Slicks for their economical use of a toothbrush. Man, King Kong Bundy was robbed.
At number 5 is King Kong Bundy for his tone on the throne.
In our penultimate musical act, Jimmy Hart sings the Strike Force theme, Girls in Cars.
Woman really look that nice.
What the hell, guys? You had a car on stage for the honky tonk man. What gives? Conspicuous by his absence was Robbie Dupree, the man who lent his voice to the original song and who had had a hit in the last 6 years. I'm just saying you could have hooked the guy up with a gig, Vince.
And when I hit a red light, baby, you know what I mean.
Man, it's hard for me to boo Jimmy Hart, but the guy's a loudmouth pipsqueak you can't wait to see get beat up. But how can you hate someone with the voice of an angel? A curious thing I noticed when watching these musical acts is you never actually see any crowd shots during them. Usually when you see footage of a concert or a musical performance at an awards show, you see some close-ups of people in the audience enjoying the music. None of that happens here, which strongly suggests to me these were filmed separately, away from the audience, then dropped in via editing. It's even more suspicious when you look at this line from an unauthorized Jesse Ventura biography that says he was paid 3 days' work for the Slammys. Having the wrestlers do canned performances was probably more for practical reasons than anything else, so it's not that huge of a discovery, but once you notice the lack of an audience during the songs, you can't unnotice it. These guys could be performing in front of a giant aquarium full of blow-up dolls for all we know. Anyway, the Mouth of the South is carried away by a large woman dressed as a bus because comedy. Then it's time for the Best Vocal Performance Award, which is less about singing and more about the noises a particular wrestler makes. In the end, Jim Duggan wins yet again for yelling ho. King Harley Race may have a crown and a cape, but he doesn't have 2 Slammys. Woo! And now we wrap up this whole debacle with If You Only Knew, performed by all the WWF stars. And by performed, I mean very badly lip-synced.
I heard a lot about chatter. That really doesn't matter to me. Belongs to me. Whoa, if you only knew.
You know, for an industry in which timing in the ring is everything, it's astonishing just how few people on this stage have any sense of rhythm. It's time to find out which of these ditties will win the coveted Song of the Year award. But it turns out we never get a winner. After the heels pass the envelope all the way down the risers, it ends up in the hands of Sika, who promptly eats it. Well, it won't be the last time somebody from his bloodline ruins the end of a show. Finally, the credits roll as we say goodbye to this, well played, WWF. Well played. And that was the second ever / 37th ever Slammy Awards. Who were the real winners? Why, the Colombian drug cartels, of course. If you want to see a microcosm of just how insane the Federation was at this time, you needn't look any further than this event. It's the characters, it's the pageantry, it's the dialogue, it's the stars, it's the minor players. This shows what happens when you crank up the brightness and the saturation on a picture of a giant ham. It's bright, it's sweaty, it's loud, it's chaos. From top to bottom, the event is wildly cheesy and confusing and hilarious all at the same time. The musical numbers alone are worth the time to watch, and of those, Stand Back is the clear MVP, but then there's everything else holding it together. The awards, the Race Duggan brawl, the random celebrity impersonators, Vince McMahon passing a stone. When combined, it makes for an amazing glimpse into the mind of the madman that is Vinnie Mac. Maybe it's why the Federation didn't do another one for another 7 years. But after everything else we've seen this company pull in the years since, maybe it's time for this kind of goofy crap to make a comeback. Who's down for a shot-for-shot recreation? I'll bring the blow.
If you only knew what I'm gonna do to you, you'll be running out of here as fast as 2 feet could carry you. Your destiny belongs to me. If you only knew what I'm gonna do